Hey everyone, Fancy Camel here. I just wanted to talk about my thoughts on the preseason runes and what Ekko can run for them. I'm not going to be giving anyone specific builds that they have to run because I actually think these runes do a good job of imposing flexibility into the current mastery and rune system that we have now. But there's definitely some that people are going to want to run more often than others, and yeah. I'm going to start off going over primary trees into secondary trees and then talking about the possibility of 2 queuing on the preseason patch. So yeah, let's get into it. So starting off here, we've got Domination, which seems to be a crowd favorite, and specifically the Electrocute Keystone. And so as you'll see, the EQ no longer will proc Electrocute like it'll currently proc Thunderlords. E counts as a single spell, and the second passive Q also will not count, as it counts as the same spell of Q. The passive proc does also not count as a spell proc for Electrocute, and it will require you either landing W or an extra auto in the landing phase in order to proc Electrocute on your opponent. This is kind of worrisome to me because it makes it much more difficult to proc early without the attack speed runes that a lot of people run. It just feels kind of clunky to me. And then in the late game, if you're not landing your W, that could also make it more difficult. But a saving grace is that Gunblade and Protobelt will count as a spell cast for the purposes of procking Electrocute. So that should be helpful. The next Domination Keystone I want to talk about is Predator. It really enables Ekko's roaming even further. And with tier 1 boots, you're hitting 500 movement speed, and with tier 2 boots, you're hitting 515 movement speed as you run down the river towards bot lane. This is just super quick. You're getting from lane to lane in no time, and the empowered E, based on sudden impact and Predator combined, is quite a packing chunk for an early laner. Keep in mind that the dummy does have 100 armor and MR, and I do not have any damage at this point to actually make it look impressive, but you get the gist.
Doubt me. I love that.
So the first sorcery keystone I'm going to talk about is Phase Rush. It seems to be the one that I see most suggested for sorcery-based primary tree builds. I don't think that this keystone's actually going to be that good on Ekko. It suffers the same problem as Electrocute at the moment, that it will not proc with EQ and the second Q pass with passive proc. I don't know why, but it's not counting the passive as a third damage instance, which I did report. But it will still proc with EQ and either Gunblade, Frost Queens, your W landing on them, or Protobelt. All of those will proc Phase Rush, but with Ekko's passive, it doesn't seem like he really needs this in his kit like someone like Aurelion Sol or Vlad does for catching up to people. The next sorcery keystone that I'd like to talk about is Arcane Comet, because I feel like people are underestimating its potential to do damage in the early game. It does 30 to 100 damage based on your level, compared to Electrocute's 40 to 220 based on level. However, it has less than half the cooldown of Electrocute at level 1, and a third of the cooldown at level, 18. On top of that, it only takes 1 damage instance to proc, compared to the 3 damage instances within 2 seconds for the Electrocute. And as discussed earlier in the video, those 3 instances might be harder to come by in the early game. On top of that, the meteor looks like it should be relatively easy to hit. As you can see in my clips, the meteor flies out while the slow from Timewinder is still applied, and so it's expected that that should hit unless they use a mobility spell, in which case Electrocute would also probably not go off there for you, because if they're using a mobility spell, you're likely not getting off your second auto. So I definitely think it's viable and something that people should play around with when this actually goes live, because it definitely does have the potential to be better overall than Electrocute, I think, especially in situations where Ekko can continuously engage on his lane opponent. So moving on to the inspiration tree, I thought I'd start with the Glacial Augment Keystone. I've seen some people talking about this, and for starters, the auto attack slow for Ekko is actually never going to be useful if you have Time Winder off cooldown, as the slow is always going to, well, almost always going to be weaker than the slow that Time Winder provides, and since slows no longer stack in League, you won't get any benefit from it. The one thing that is interesting is that you will be able to use the slow from something like Frost Queen's Claim or Gunblade to apply the AoE line freeze ray that the Keystone's passive also provides. This creates a long-standing 5-second slow field, and although the particle is bugged, you can see the Renekton in the clip that I provided. His move speed is down for a very long time because he is standing still on the area that was hit by the freeze ray. So just kind of a niche little interaction there that I thought I'd touch on, but ultimately I don't believe that this is a very good keystone for Ekko to run. Another inspiration keystone would be Summoner Specialist, which would allow Ekko to take Ignite or Exhaust based on his laning phase and hoping to push a lead, and then transition to Teleport later to go into split push style. So moving on to secondary tree options, I'd like to start with the sorcery tree. Ekko can run most things here pretty reliably. Scorch is one that I wouldn't particularly recommend because it has a very low base damage and a 20-second cooldown. You can stack it with Arcane Comet to just add a little bit more damage to it, but it is kind of just an annoyance at best, especially 40 magic damage late game. Transcendence is another one I wouldn't particularly recommend because Ekko really would like some flat AP in there, and if you're stacking CDR items, your burst is likely going to be lower because those items tend to be stacked with a little bit of survivability in them as well. Nullifying Orb, you can run into a tough matchup. Ultimate Hat, nice to reduce the cooldown. Absolute Focus has some good synergy with Ekko's ult because it puts him back above 70% health, which is the threshold for that ability. Gathering Storm is just going to scale you into the late game even better with the stacking AP, and Mana Flow Band can be used to endlessly wave clear against opponents. One of the basic runes that I really enjoy is actually Water Walk. I've seen some people kind of not seeming so impressed by it. I think that with how early you gain the 25 move speed, like that's before you even exit the lane, I think it is very useful for either escaping ganks or immediately getting that roam on, and would synergize great with the Predator Keystone. Another sorcery rune that I wanted to touch on a little bit is the Celerity rune, because I see people seem to think that it's just going to be complete garbage on Ekko because by the time you've procced your passive, what else could you get damage on? And it's pretty much only the second pass of your Q. So I thought I'd mention that, for one, if you go the Frost Queen's Claim build at all, any tribute procs will give you increased AP for the move speed from the tribute proc, so that'll only not increase the damage of the first spell that fires the tribute proc off. The rest of your combo will get that slight damage increase. Any home guard teleports late game will have the increased AP from the move speed you get from home guard. Any use of the Predator Keystone, you'll get increased AP while in the Predator mode. If you run the Water Walking basic rune, which I just touched on previously, you'll get increased AP in the river. As well, there's Lichbane and Tier 2 boots that we get that would also give us a slight bit of AP for just completing those items. So it's around 16 to 20 AP or so when you have a move speed proc going for the AP that you get. So around an Amplifying Tome worth, 435 gold for a basic rune seems pretty okay. So if you're having any of these synergies in your build pack, I definitely think Celerity is an option. I did not mention Phase Rush or Relentless Hunter, I believe the name is, in the Domination tree, because Relentless Hunter's move speed that you get is out of combat, so you'd instantly lose that AP when you get engaged. And Phase Rush is much the same as Ekko's passive, that you need 3 unique damage instances, so the AP gain from it would only really be useful on the second Q pass or like ult or something. So that's why I didn't mention those as a plus for this rune. So the next secondary tree I want to talk about is the Domination tree. Starting it off, Sudden Impact is a pretty nice rune for Ekko. So your E's, Dash, and Blink will both apply this rune. So if you're not able to blink to someone immediately with your E, the blink itself will extend that magic pen for the next 3 seconds for you. It's also worth noting that Hextech Protobelt Dash will proc this magic pen for the next 3 seconds, so that's pretty neat. Eyeball collection, for a killer assist on a champion you get 2 eyeballs, and for a killer assist on a ward you get 1. Once you've reached 20 you get a 7 magic pen, which is pretty sweet, and of course the 20 AP from actually collecting them. So that's well worth the gold for that, but it could take a while to stack up, so use that as you will. Relentless Hunter, 8 out of combat move speed plus 8 per bounty stack. So bounty hunter stacks or kills or assists on enemy champions, and that's a pretty good amount when stacked, 48 move speed. Ingenious Hunter is another one that's pretty nice when fully stacked. That's 31% of active item CDR, which is really great on like Protobelt, Gunblade, Zanya's. You know, that's awesome. Ghost Poro is one that I'm really interested in. So it'll leave a little Poro behind in a bush once you've stood in it for a second, and then that Poro will not leave until it has been detected by an enemy champion. So if you're able to leave it in the little pixel brush, they won't actually disappear until someone walks into it, but it will provide vision if they walk around it, so that's pretty nice. And if it disappears, it pings the map for you, so that's cool. Zombie Ward is one that I'm particularly interested in. I'm not very good with using the sweeping trinket when I'm mid. I really value having wards, but what's neat about this is when your wards expire, they actually resurrect as a zombie ward, just further extending the time that you have vision there unless it gets swept. So I really like that as well. The next potential secondary tree for Ekko that I want to talk about is actually the Precision tree, and that's mainly for the Legend Tenacity rune. So Legend Tenacity stacked fully with Mercury Treads gives you 44% tenacity, which is basically almost cutting in half any CC that you're hit with. And it comes with some pretty neat other runes in this tree. Triumph is basically Dangerous Game with a bit of a higher return. Overheal, for an example, at level 11 with a Protobelt would give you a 157 health shield, which is, you know, about 10% of your health at that level when you consider the plus 30. And then at the bottom there's 3 different damage dealing runes based on different health thresholds, and that would be based on if you're against a tanky team you might take cut down, yeah, so on and so forth. But that Legend Tenacity versus high CC teams, I definitely think would be an incredible option for Ekko to run. Inspiration is the final tree I want to talk about for a secondary option for Ekko. Hextech Flash Traps, and I don't think will be very useful. You can only use it when your flash is on cooldown and you have to stand still while you channel it. You could maybe use it for a cheeky W, but outside of that, your E is for that purpose, getting into your parallel convergence, and the most I can see it used for is just getting over walls. Perfect Timing is nice, 15% off Zanya's cooldown, and it'll stack with other item CDR type things like this and the previous Domination rune. Magical Footwear, free boots that are slightly faster than other ones, that's cool. You have to wait till 10 minutes, which kind of sucks though. Cosmic Insight, bunch of free CDR, again, that'll stack with the CDR from Perfect Timing if you take it, or it'll stack with that Domination rune for the item CDRs. Approach Velocity, I think, is a bad rune on Ekko. The 1000 range is severely limiting, and your EQ combo is about that same if you account for the E's, Dash, and Blink. So I don't believe you're really going to ever be using this. It doesn't really synergize with Frost Queens from what I tested either, because the range is just so short. Future market, I think it's up to you, but I don't find the lending rate increasing so slowly to be useful. It is kind of neat when you go into debt, the negative gold counter, but I don't see this being very useful in game. So the final rune, Minion Dematerializer, I think it's good for if you find you constantly fall behind in levels, which you should probably fix in the first place, but the percent damage increase to minions can help you continue to hit wave clear breakpoints if you're falling behind on items for whatever reason. I see people talking about this being the rune that's going to solve Ekko's 2Q problems in Season 8. I'm going to talk about the 2Q in just a sec, but Minion Dematerializer I don't think is going to be necessary on Ekko, and it'll be more of a preference thing, if anything. Okay, so I know a lot of people are wondering if Ekko will be able to do the 2Q in Season 8, and simply put, the way he currently is on the PBE, he will not be able to 2Q at level 1. The highest AP he can possibly get at level 1 is taking an Amplifying Tome, and it caps out at 50, but that's still not enough to 2Q clear at level 1. Regardless of what you go in runes, Ekko will be able to 2Q clear at level 3. I've tested this going the Inspiration and Sorcery route, which is the highest AP you can possibly get early on, as well as the Domination Sorcery route, which a bunch of people have decided they would like to often go with his runes. Once you have hit level 3 and taken a second point in Q, you are able to 2Q the wave again. But early on, it seems that the 2Q will be gone for Ekko.